Okay, we're recording.
All right, let's get this party started. I call to order the workshop for Bullhead City Elementary School Board on Wednesday, March 18th, 2020 at 5:37 p.m. Secretary, please call the roll.
Randy Dubois,
Present.
Doug Lutz,
Here.
Corey Burgess,
Here.
Jeannie Borland.
Here.
Right.
Mr. President, the items on our workshop, the first one has to do with the Staff Appreciation Day and what the board would like to do in reference to that.
In years past, we had the meal and the awards on Friday at the end of the school year. We had done that with the high school district. Is that the idea again?
What?
Say again?
Staff appreciation?
The only reason why we held it over is because they couldn't.
I know that, I think it was the high school board members that used to get all the gift cards and raffles things. I wasn't a part of that at that time, so I don't really have much notice of, information on that.
We have Mr. Flora here, and he's going to share any information he has.
So, Mr. Flores, superintendent of the Crushed High School. Since my arrival, we had two presidents, Lori Crampton, who was pushing to have us increase the number of awards we gave to both teachers and students. As of the turn of the year, Carrie Burgess became the president, and we were looking to cut down on the number for time reasons. We were going to alternate schools. But then we decided again to go back to celebrating and rewarding more students. So the only reason why we didn't do it this month was because of the schools being closed. We didn't want to present an award to them and they weren't here, staff and students.
We're talking about the end of the year.
Oh, at the end of the year. We haven't made any decisions on that as of now, but absolutely. We want to award and recognize teachers and staff members and students. And we'll definitely be doing something at the end of the year for sure.
In years past, the elementary district and the high school district have done theirs together. Is that something that we're wanting to do again?
On the same day, a celebratory thing, that would be
Yeah,
fun.
we held it at the Mojave High School the last few years.
That would be great.
And had our meal in there and the awards in the auditorium, and it went pretty well in years past. I'd like to do
The more the
same.
merrier, absolutely.
There was one concern with being on Fridays. Certified staff, or no, classified staff, not being a paid day, getting them there. So something we might want to take into consideration and how we're going to handle that.
Well, Dr. Stewart and I will work out the details, but we're more than glad to cooperate and be involved. I think it'd be great, especially if there's food.
Mr. President, I think one of the things for our board to discuss is how we might go about having food, since in the past, the districts paid for it out of M&O funds, which was not proper. So we would look for some direction on how you all might want to do that. If you want donations, if you want, how you want to go about doing that, because food brings people, right?
Absolutely. I think we need to look in to see what all our options are there. It's approaching quickly, so we've got to figure out where we're going to go and what we're going to do now. So at this point, my recommendation would be, and let's see what the other members feel, how the other board members feel about this, is let's see what options we have, whether it be through donation or sponsorships or where we decide to go that route. Let's see what options we have. I think there's still enough time to put that together.
Mr. President, this is Doug Lutz. I agree, and I think we also need to find out what Chartwell's is going to charge for this particular meal.
We can look into that, Doug.
That way we will know at least what we're having to, raise the funds for or whatever.
We can do that.
And you think by next meeting we could have that information? Is that enough time?
Absolutely.
All right. So any other comments, concerns? No? All right,
No, I think that sounds good to look into it.
okay.
All right, thank you. Mr. President, given the circumstances, you suggested we have an update on what's been going on relative to COVID-19. It's been a busy week, actually a week and a half. So I'm going to give you kind of a rundown of what's been going on. Up until 4 p.m. on last Sunday, there were literally continuous conversations between Mr. Flora, Mr. Ross, and me, and probably about once a day correspondence in one way or another with the other superintendents along the river, because we all knew that what one district did would affect all the districts. And at that time, everyone along the river was wanting to stay open, especially since a week and a half ago, there were no cases in our area. Then based on, this was also based on written advice from Kathy Hoffman and the head of the Arizona Department of Health Services, that schools would be the safest place for kids to be. We also were in webinars and phone conferences early last week with Arizona Department of Health Services, Mojave County Health Department, and again with all of the superintendents bridge to bridge. As of 4 p.m. on Sunday, when Governor Ducey made his announcement, our joint emergency leadership team was in the conference room next door by 4:45. Mr. Flora, Mrs. Lott, Mr. Ross, and Mrs. Brown, all of us, were there. First, we thoroughly read the documents to kind of decide what they really meant for all of us. Then immediately drafted and disseminated an auto dialer to parents. Not as easy sometimes as it seems, because we wanted to make sure the message was consistent for both districts, and that it was brief enough that people would actually listen to the whole thing. Following that, we drafted and disseminated an email to parents with more detail about what we knew at the time, being very cognizant of the legal implications. Then we posted that same email on Facebook and directed that it be put on the webpage as soon as we could get our webmaster to do so. The next step was drafting and disseminating a message to employees based on the limited information we had at the time. And by then it was about 8 or 8:30 to get that out, but we did so, and then responded to any responses that we got back from folks relative to that. We approved Alex Mayo's plan for the drive-by pickup food service. He had been all over the planning for that, had I think 2 or 3 different plans that we could put into place this week, and we opted for the drive-by pickup so that we were minimizing the exposure of both Chartwell employees and the families who were stopping by. So it's open from 8 to 10 each weekday. We have 5 sites: Bullhead Middle School, Sunrise, Fox Creek, Diamondback, and River Valley High School. So the drive-by here at the middle school serves Mojave High, Desert Valley, and the middle school students. I haven't seen the numbers for today, but as of yesterday, the numbers had doubled from the day before. And so I'm guessing, this is just a guess, but I think we're probably in the range of 500 a day. And when they drive by and pick up, they get both breakfast and lunch. Rather to our dismay, because we know we also have sick children, not necessarily with coronavirus, but sick children, the children must be in the vehicle. And we appealed that today and got denied. So when the families drive through, they only get to pick up for the kids who are actually in the vehicle. On Monday, first thing, I delegated a number of tasks to district office staff, including making signs for the pickup so that we didn't have traffic jams around here. The cost analysis for continuing to pay our employees, particularly our classified employees, and I consulted with you on that. We began collecting instructional resources for our meeting on Friday. Mrs. Lott worked on that, and Mr. Ross kept up with Facebook and webpage up-to-dates and responses to the media. We participated in an ADE webinar that day, which included in the actual room in Phoenix, people from ADE ASA, AEA, ASBA, ADHS, and all the other alphabet groups, as well as superintendents from the large districts in both Phoenix and Tucson, and several county superintendents. Over 500 participated either in the webinar or on the phone. Some of us couldn't even get into the webinar even though we were registered because they had reached their 500 limit. The purpose of that meeting was for Kathy Hoffman, the Superintendent of Public Instruction, and folks from the Governor's Office to hear suggestions, concerns from all of these stakeholders and try to respond to some things. But mostly it was just share your ideas and concerns. We then immediately after that webinar participated in Mojave County follow-up, which is the Mojave County Superintendents and Mojave County Health Department to bring us up to speed. Keep in mind that prior to the governor's announcement, we had been directed to follow the directions of the state Department of Health Services and the county health in terms of deciding whether or not to consider closure. That was a moot point at that time, but we still want to keep up to date with the cases in Mojave County, if there are any, and in our surrounding areas. I met with you to talk about this and whether you wanted this on the agenda, how you wanted it, and so the decision was to put it in this workshop. We received, at the end of the day, I received an email from the director of Arizona Superintendents Association requesting that the superintendents lobby the legislators about including the recommended elements in the bill. So I'm going to shift what's up on the screen so some of you can see, so all of you can see some of these items. Actually, the first one I'm showing you is John Hopkins' map of cases in the world. And you can see that right now, as of an hour ago, 214,894 cases in the world. And this shows what's going on in the United States. So we've been watching this very closely. In this corner, you'll notice the yellow line, and that is the cases in China. So you can see that they had a major increase, and then it has leveled off in China. The green line is the total of people who've recovered in the world, and the yellow line is the rest of the world, the curve of the rest of the world as the cases increase. I will tell you that on yesterday morning, the yellow line ended right here, right with the orange line. The other dots here have been since yesterday. So we've been following this data very closely, and we are hopeful that the people making decisions are watching this as well. I was referring to the request from Mark Jornstad at ASA that we lobby our legislators to be considering the points that have been recommended to them for consideration in their budget bill. Apparently they have decided today to put it in a separate act of legislation, and I learned of this just before this meeting started, so this is fresh off the presses, where they have taken the items and put them just in one bill instead of burying them throughout the budget bill. My understanding is this will be considered tomorrow. So essentially, it's saying that the statewide closure of public schools in the state is lifted on or before March 29th. All of the following apply. So it's leaving an opening for extension of the closure, but these items apply until then. So the first one has that we are not required to extend the number of school days or add additional instructional hours after the statewide closure ends. Number 2 indicates that the testing window for statewide assessment will be extended to May 31st, which is a little awkward for us since school is out on the 22nd. Number 3 indicates that the letter grade pursuant to the statutes, if a school's letter grades are higher than the public school's letter grade or the public school's, sorry, that one doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Okay, for 2019-20 school year, a public school's letter grade pursuant to section 15241 Arizona Revised Statutes is the higher of the public school's 2018-19 letter grade or the public school's 2019-20 letter grade. This implies that there is every intention, these two things have implied that there's every intention of continuing with ACM2 testing. Number 4 indicates that we continue to pay our employees throughout the duration of the closure. And then it lists in B a number of items that will take effect if the closure is not ended by the 29th. Still, we're not required to extend the school days. Beginning on March 30, each public school in the state shall offer students general education delivery via alternative formats. And I was going to tell you that we have been working on those alternate ones. We've been putting some on our Facebook page and our web page, some enrichment kinds of activities for families who have access to the internet. And in our meeting on Friday, the leadership team meeting on Friday, which has been scheduled for 6 weeks or so, that we will be putting together a very cohesive plan for providing instructional services to our students, including special ed students and 504 plan students. We've taken a little time with that because, number 1, we could have moved that meeting up, but we have been literally so busy, I don't know when we would have fit the meeting in. And number 2, all of these rules and regulations have been shifting. It's been very fluid, literally hour to hour. So this indicates that what we would be doing anyway to have a delivery system. I will tell you that we're not recommending anything that involves paper packets because we have a concern that if we give out paper packets and collect them, that not just coronavirus, but all kinds of other things could be present on those packets and endanger our employees when those packets come in. So we're exploring ways of making sure that whatever it is we make available is available to every student in an appropriate way. Number 3 says, if the statewide closure is not lifted before the scheduled end of the public school's posted school year calendar, the public school shall continue offering general ed delivery for formats as prescribed in paragraph 2. And if the closure is lifted before the end of the school year, we would resume physical operations as usual on the date that a statewide closure of public schools is lifted and continue to offer the services. And then there are 2 more things, but I think the critical ones are the ones that have to do with paying employees and providing services to our students.
And this.
Dr. Stewart,
Yes, Doug.
by this paying of employees, you know, I'm all for it. They can't go without checks, but at the same time, gift of public funds and where are these dollars coming from to pay them for time off and the gift of public funds?
That was part of the
Any
discussions.
idea?
You're right, Doug.
Anybody yet?
Well, that was part of the discussions, and what we would do is employees would be reassigned, either you could call it reassigned to home, or they are on call, and we would in fact have things for folks to do. Now, that's a little more problematic with our classified people than it is with our certified people, but they would have to be on call. So usually that means that they have to be able to come to work within an hour. And so it's like reassigning somebody at home. Cloud teachers, we would probably bring in for some planning and some activities or PDs or whatever, but in small groups. CDC is recommending groups less than 50. The president recommends groups less than 10. I'm sorry, fewer than 10, fewer than 50. And so we are already building in some ideas for how to make that work so we can continue to do the things we need to do, and that people are not getting a gift of public funds, that they are in fact responsible to do some things for our district.
Yeah, I'm thinking of several of them, but bus drivers, you know, we can assign them at home, but what are they gonna be doing? Anything that's related to their job, those type of things. But I guess you haven't received any kind of questions. We don't have to make up the days, so we won't run out of funds
That
if we
was our-
continue to pay these people?
Right,
Is
that
that
was our
correct?
concern as well. And so since there is no obligation to extend the length of the school year, it shouldn't have too much effect on our budget. It will require some action on the part of the board. That's not agendized for tonight, but I know Corey's going to address that with all of you because we were awaiting these steps to be taken by the state. We thought we were going to get some of this information clarified on Monday, and then we thought it was going to be Tuesday. And now we've got a little more information, but this is just a bill right now. It hasn't even been voted on in the legislature. I got it just literally at 5:30, so I will forward a copy to each of you via email when this meeting is over, so that you can see the actual bill. I will say that we've continued to do a collaboration in district. I was going to show you this is the memo that I sent to all of the members of the House and the members of the Senate on their respective education committees. And I'm not going to read it to you. I did send it to board members, but I have it up here for others to see, and I would be happy to provide copies of it to anybody who wants them. But it's encouraging the legislators to approve the very things that are in this bill that we were just looking at.
Dr. Stewart,
Yes, ma'am.
I read your letter to the legislators, and I think it was well done. I feel it recognized all the aspects and concerns that I've seen from staff in the community, so I appreciate that.
Thank you, I appreciate your comment. A couple of things that I did put and try to make a big point of is if this closure actually ends next Friday, a week from this Friday, our testing schedule starts on March 31st. That means our children would be back in school for only one day prior to the beginning of testing. We're very concerned about that. This has to have been a big disruption in the lives of our children. And so you'll notice in this memo I've encouraged the legislature to direct the ADE and the U.S. Department of Education on behalf of the entire state for a one-year waiver on the required academic assessments that the USDOE has. This saves districts time of applying for those waivers individually, since this decision impacted the entire state. I also asked the legislators to consider directing the ADE to suspend AZM2 in the spring of 2020. I'm hopeful that other superintendents and school boards will have urged the legislature in the same way. Students will not in any way be ready for testing when they return. That's not for lack of people trying and people caring about it. It's that it will take time to get them back into routines. So even if we delay the beginning of testing, as would be allowed from this bill, then we have to crunch up the testing in a tighter window And that puts more stress on students, and it puts more stress on our tech system to have that many things occurring simultaneously. Somebody said to me yesterday, when children return to school, do we want them to spend their time testing or their time learning? I think the most important thing that parents and community members and citizens of Arizona could do to help this situation would be to give that message to the legislature. We want our children learning, not testing. I have more things that have been going on this week, but I think you get the picture that we have been pretty busy. There's a slide, we've been doing webinars or phone conferences literally every day and sometimes twice a day. This is one slide from the ADE's webinar yesterday. And so you can see the connection between what the ADE was proposing and what we now see in that bill that I showed you a minute ago. On Friday, the leadership team will meet. We will determine a coordinated, planned instructional program, including appropriate programming for students with IEPs or 504 plans. And we will roll that out to teachers and hopefully have that in place to start next Monday. I'll entertain any questions y'all might have about the update.
I have a couple questions. The bill currently has not been passed. So right now, we've only have set aside, or you've only made the decision to pay through the last pay period, those 2 or 3 days.
Today is the end of the pay period.
Is the end of the pay period.
And I felt like you all would back me of making, and actually Mr. Flora as well for the high school district. I was pretty confident that you all would back me in that kind of executive decision. But in terms of this next pay period, I will need some direction.
Yes, that's my concern, because we don't know what the legislation is going to vote. And our pay period starts tomorrow. And I believe, and this is my feeling on this, that our staff needs to know that we're still going to be taking care of that. I'd like to see us continue with the pay and not use PTO throughout that time period. What are your thoughts from the rest of the board?
This is Brandy. I also agree that the staff needs to be paid. We don't want to lose our valued staff members, and we don't want hardships in our community. So I agree they also should be continue to be paid, if possible.
This is Jeannie, and I agree with both of you that our staff needs to continue to get paid.
Mr. Lutz, any thoughts?
Yeah, I wish the heck the governor and so on would have addressed this earlier, but the fact that we don't have to make up these days, we would not exceed our budget. We're still into the gift of public funds things, but I guess as long as we'll have the money there, yes, I certainly would like the staff to be paid too for this time off. It's a shame, but anyway, yes.
Okay, since this cannot be official action, since this is a workshop, might I recommend that you have even telephonically a special meeting in the next couple of days or 3 days or whatever, with one item on the agenda, and that is to pass a resolution authorizing us to do this. I have a sample resolution that's been approved in other districts in the state already. And then that would legally authorize us to proceed in the manner that you've just described.
Do we need any direction at this point, just to do the resolution? Is that the only direction we need at this point, right?
I think so, yeah. And I sent to you all as part of, in fact, as part of the agenda, was the letter from your attorney indicating that you do have the authority as a governing board to make decisions in behalf of what you believe to be in the best interest of the district and the community relative to salaries and a number of other decisions too, but in this case relative to salaries.
All right. I would like to start with that direction to get that resolution drafted. We need to set a date where we could just do a telephone conference meeting for the one item. What date is the best for all of you?
This is Jeannie. I'm good. I am working from home now.
I see, this is Brandy, I see there's an insurance meeting on the 23rd at 4, so I don't know if that's still going on. But, other than that, I'm pretty free during the weekdays.
We will in fact be holding that meeting, but it, and of course it is a public meeting, but most of the members and probably, for sure, the insurance representatives will be doing it via life size. And that will limit the number of folks who, are congregating in one place at a time. But then that also allows for public participation.
Do we need to have this meeting earlier than the 23rd, though?
We don't really have to have it any earlier than that because no money would be going in or out in the next, 3 business days. Because the pay period starts on Thursday. It's just a matter of our payroll keeping track of things. And so, and technically it wouldn't matter for another week.
Mr. President, do you want to do the 24th?
24th works for me. What about the rest of you? Doug?
This is Doug. I'll be in Phoenix. Sorry, I'm gonna miss that one.
And Jeannie, you said you're working from home, correct?
Actually, that meeting is on the
Yeah.
23rd. It's on Monday, the 23rd.
Yeah.
If you want to do
Randy
a
wanted
separate
to do
date,
the
I did.
24th,
Okay,
yeah.
I'm sorry.
So,
If it's just telephonic, I mean,
That's fine if you want. the 24th. I'm sorry, I misunderstood.
okay, no worries. So Jeannie, does the 24th work for you?
yes.
All right. Doug said he will be out of town, wouldn't be able to make it. Do you want us to try to call you in Phoenix, Doug, or?
Might be kind of tough, Mr. President. So if you've got a quorum,
We do.
if you don't have a quorum, yes, I will somehow participate.
All right. Any particular time?
After 5, anytime after 5 for me.
So does 5:30 work for both of you? Jeannie?
Yes.
All right, let's set it up for 5:30 on the 24th.
Okay.
And in the meantime, you all can each of you can let Kim know if you're going to be here physically or if you want to participate on the phone.
All right, sounds good. Any other information we need to discuss at this time?
One last question for Dr. Stewart. She mentioned the meals, the 500, was that total meals given out, Dr. Stewart?
My guess for today is somewhere in the range of 500, but it would be both lunch and breakfast because they handed out at the same time. I know yesterday we were at
Thank you.
298, so I'm guessing that, we're close to 500 today.
All right. Anything else? All right. I'd like to adjourn this meeting. So I need a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Second,
second.
it's Jeannie.
Corey Burgess,
Aye.
Brandy Dubois,
Aye.
Doug Lutz,
Aye.
Jeannie Borland.
Aye.
All right, moving on to our regular meeting. I call this meeting to order, our regular meeting in Bullitt Elementary School District. Board on Wednesday, March 28, 2020 at 6:12 p.m. Roll call.
Corey Burgess,
Here.
Brandy Dubois,
Present.
Doug Lutz,
Here.
Jeannie Borland.
Here.
All right. Citizens present, if you please sign in the back if you were here, and you will all join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And justice.
Gotta get them together.
This is time for a call to the public. This is a call to the public where the public may speak to the governing board regarding issues within the jurisdiction of the governing board and is subject to reasonable time, space, and manner restriction the governing board may establish. Comments will be limited to 3 minutes per individual as specifically waived by the governing board. At the conclusion of the call to the public, individual members of the governing board may respond to criticism made by those who have addressed the board, may ask staff to review a matter, or may ask that a matter be placed on a future agenda. However, the governing board cannot take action on matters that have not been noticed as part of the noticed in advance as part of the agenda. Do we have any call to the public? All right. Moving on, item 2.6, adoption of the agenda. Can I get a motion?
I move we adopt the agenda as presented.
I will second that.
Okay.
Corey Burgess,
Aye.
Doug Lutz,
Aye.
Jeannie Borland,
Aye.
Brandy Dubois.
Aye.
Item 2.7, superintendent reports. Dr. Stewart?
Thank you, Mr. President. Essentially, I've given you lots of updates. If you have questions about any of those items, I'd be happy to answer them. Prior to that, I will tell you that for the last item, which has to do with miscellaneous updates, Lance just notified me that the president has signed the aid bill, the emergency aid bill. So there will be federal dollars coming to the state for closures and for all of the incidents that have to do with COVID. Oh, and I will note for you that on the agenda, we have events will not occur if schools remain closed, excluding 21st century. I'm sorry, that should be including 21st century grant meetings for parents held on Wednesday night.
Do we have any questions for the superintendent on her reports?
This is Doug. I have one question for Dr. Stewart. In the one report, she mentions turning over the bids and submission of bids and grant proposals to staff on hand. Do we have qualified people for this, and are we going to reduce the contract with ABM in regards?
The answer to the first question is yes, plus we will be training additional staff. And the answer to the other is that will be an expectation for ABM, and I will be sharing that with Logan Cox, who is the regional director. We meet monthly. He knows that request will be coming.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Item 2.8, donations. Once again, our community has stepped up and helped our schools out. We'd like to thank all of those who did donate for us. We saw some fantastic donations this month going into many of our different schools. And we're bringing them up on the screen. We had a check that was sent to us from the Arizona Knights of Columbus, $602.74. We had $11 bottles of glue donated to us by Lance Ross. We had miscellaneous crafting supplies from Joanne Fabrics, Christmas crafts, gift wrapping, gingerbread. Estimated value on that $3,000 to $3,500. Books for the library valued at $500 from Garner Book Service. And 30 classroom lockdown kits from Colorado River Women's Council valued at $2,100. So once again, as we always in the past, have some fantastic donations from our community to help our schools out.
If I can, Mr. President, if I can add something that we don't have on paper there, I'm sure we will in the future. The Friday before spring break, our entire staff was trained in Stop the Bleed. by local and other firefighters, volunteers for this training. And they are donating to every classroom in our district the Stop the Bleed Clip kit to go in the classrooms. So those are valued at about $65 a piece. So I don't know the total value, and I'm sure we'll have a total in the future, but I don't want to forget that because that's a significant donation to our district.
Yes, I thank all the health professionals that helped us out with that also. Item 2.9, board member updates. Do we have any updates this time?
I do not.
None? All right, moving on. Item 3.1, the consent agenda. I'll make a motion that we adopt the consent agenda.
I second, but there's a couple of administrative reports I would like to address.
Which reports are those?
It would be the transportation and also Chartwell's.
Okay, so I'll amend my motion to adopt the consent agenda minus transportation and Chartwell's reports.
I'll do my best to answer your questions, Doug. I instructed our directors and principals to not be present tonight to allow us to have more room for community people if they came. So I'll do my best to answer your questions.
Do we need to vote to approve minus those two items first?
You can do that.
Yeah. So we have a first and a second. Doug seconded.
Corey Burgess,
Aye?
Doug Lutz,
Aye.
Randy Dubois,
Aye.
Jeannie Borland.
Aye.
Doug, what were your questions on those two reports?
Okay, it's pretty simple really, but the transportation, I noticed that the director had the, budget figures, the 100-day report for budgets for the high school, but not for the elementary, and you'd think the two would be kind of hand in hand. I was going to ask him why he doesn't have it here for the elementary, what do you submit for your budgeting, but I don't know, Carolyn, if you can answer that one or not.
I can. He did give me a copy of that, and I thought it was going to be attached to his report to you. I will make absolutely certain that you get it and that it is part of next month's reports as well.
Okay, you know the one I'm talking about, right?
I do. It's on my desk.
Okay, it's the route miles report for the budget purposes. Okay.
Exactly.
And then on the, I think this is just some kind of funny numbers, but Chartwell's, the report starts out, last year the enrollment for Bullhead City Elementary was 2676. This year the enrollment is 2734. This is a decrease of 38 students. Well, not in my math. And so it kind of makes the other numbers look kind of funny that were reported.
We will check on that because our enrollment is actually about 2730 or 35.
It's supposed to be
So
2634, because that would be 38.
right, but it's up instead of down. So
If we put 2734, if that was 2634, that would be an increase of 38. So that's probably a typo.
I'm thinking it's a typo because I know our enrollment, if you look at the enrollment report earlier, you'll see that our enrollment really is at 2730 or 2735, somewhere in there. We are in fact up 5 students from a year ago. I think it's been a number of years since that's been the case.
Okay.
We'll check on that though.
Okay, I'm curious what's really the true numbers there. Okay. If you get back to me, thank you.
Sure, and Doug, if my memory serves, the mileage, the overall mileage for our district for the first half of the year was about 198,000 miles. Don't hold me to that, but that's the number that sticks in my mind.
Any other questions on those two reports? All right, so I'll move that we approve the last two reports as submitted.
Jeannie, I second.
Corey Burgess,
Aye.
Doug Lutz,
Aye.
Randy Dubois,
Aye.
Jeannie Borland.
Aye.
Okay, item 3.3, personnel. Need a motion to approve the personnel recommendations.
That's part of your consent agenda
Oh.
that you've already
Aye.
approved.
Way off, scratch that, sorry. We have, we're on to 4. Here we go, old business, I apologize. Intergovernmental agreements 4.1. We get an update on this?
I had sent some information to you in the memo regarding the Coyote Canyon School Use Agreement. The change that the high school district had made, or no, I'm sorry, not the change the district had made. Jeannie's question about the original numbers. Jeannie, I went back and looked in my electronic records, and the earliest version of this that I still had was from November, which is the crossed off or the strike throughs that you see on this version, and then putting in the rent instead of dividing the utilities. So it could be however you all want it to be. The high school has approved it as it appears here with the strike-throughs and with the addition of, for the term of section 3, which is second semester.
And if I was reading correctly, it was still stating that they want us to pay on the principal.
That's on the
Which
other
we
one.
would
That's on the
disagree
other
with.
one. That's on the
That's on
special
the other
ed
one?
one. Yeah, this is just for the
Okay,
use of
I'm sorry.
facilities. That's okay.
Any other questions on the facility use? Okay, moving on to the special education one.
Okay, the IGA that has to do with the special ed consortium, you had directed me to cross off the section in red that is the principal of the campus. Crush put the percentages back in at 60% for Crush and 40% for our district. I have spent some time talking with Mr. Flora about that and also researching on my own due to the nature of the students in our academy and some other issues relative to supervision of the academy. Mr. Heaton has in fact had to spend quite a bit of time as an administrator relative to our students. So that's the basis on which the high school requested that we reinsert that item.
Any follow-up questions on that?
I do. How many students are in the Crushed Academy versus our Life Academy?
Ooh, I'm going to have to defer to some information. Gina, do you have that information roughly? All right, Jeannie, are you talking about their entire Crushed Academy or just their Life Academy?
I mean, I'm talking, how many, I mean, I'm under the impression we have, what, at most 15 students in our academy?
Right now, we have 15 during the day, and we have 3 in an after-school program because they cannot attend during the day. So at the moment, we have 18.
I can't speak to the actual daily numbers at the Crushed Academy because it's a fluid environment. So you have a certain number of students that are enrolled, but they are not required to be on the campus all at the same time every day. And then there's also a large portion that are checking in from home and doing their work and checking in with their teacher. So enrollment versus how many are actually on the campus at any given moment is fluid. I think the top enrollment is right around 200.
They're around 170.
Yeah, so total enrollment is 170 kids, but they're never on the campus at the same time. Does that make sense?
Somewhere around there. That's a.
But this number is based off the time that Mr. Heaton spends handling Crush time with students and time with our students. I also did some checking into these numbers too and come to find out that he spends a great deal of time with our students over there. A student may have a meltdown, and he's the administrator who's there that has to be and handle that situation. He'll be called out of meetings to come over and handle a situation. That kid's, flipping out, and he's got to be there. So this number, he said, it's at least 40% of his time, sometimes even more, is spent with our students. So even though we do have fewer students, it's the amount of time he spends handling the situations with our students compared to handling the situation with their students.
And I can verify that because I've also been substitute Mr. Eaton for the day on several occasions. And I have also assisted with, I call them our littles, who are having a meltdown and they're in the office and we are breathing and doing whatever their IEP says that they need to help them reintegrate back into class.
And I would also say, Jeannie, that my understanding is that the 60-40 split would only be for second semester. We had some issues first semester, but we also had some other things in place helping that program be successful. And so we'd be talking about 40% of half of the salary and benefits.
So I think if we have a principal that is needing 40% of the time for 18 students, this is a program we might need to reevaluate what qualifies them to remain in that program in the upcoming years.
Well,
Absolutely, and we are looking at restructuring a number of things that would help us with that.
Crush won't even be there next year, so we'll be on our own in that facility next year. So that's really going to change the way that this financials all change. We're going to be eating that $60,000 we were getting from Crushed for the services for them to be there. We won't have next year. We will be having to staff with our own administrator on this campus for our kids next year. So this board made some decisions and some choices that weren't good ones. We opened up a can of worms thinking that we were being taken advantage of, and instead of doing our homework and finding out that we were actually getting the best deal here, now we're to the tune of $110,000 in the hole, because come to find out the high school was being very generous with their share of that services. And that number is going up because now we have to put an administrator on that campus next year.
Well, and I will say, I appreciate you saying that, Corey, but the plan that I intend to bring to you, yes, there will be an administrator, but it will not be an administrator whose sole responsibility is to be just an administrator. That person will have some other responsibilities, and I think with that plan, we will end up with at least a break-even situation.
But only with the cost of administrators. We'll still lose that
With the cost of
$110,000.
personnel. Yeah, with the cost of
Yeah,
personnel.
we're still
not with the
$110,000 in the hole. We're just not going up more because we don't have to hire another administrator because of those decisions. So yeah, we got to do our homework. Those are
I'd
some,
just like to say it's an interesting way to find out that they will not be in that facility next year.
That was in fact decided at Monday's Crushed board meeting. The discussion had gone on for a couple of months, but it was in fact approved at Monday's Crushed board meeting.
True, and Dr. Stewart, President Burgess, I think the board too needs to look at whether this program, it started a couple of years ago, but is it really doing what it's supposed to, and is it worth keeping in place? I think that's one of the things we have to look at as well.
we're definitely going to have to take a hard look at that. With the increase we're going to have in our budget next year, we're going to have to find somewhere to find that $110,000. So, and it might be this program. So we're definitely going to have to look at that. It's a shame, but sometimes that's just the way it happens. So at this time, I'd like to move that we approve the IGAs as submitted.
I move we approve the IGAs as submitted.
I'll second.
Corey Burgess,
Aye.
Doug Lutz,
Aye.
Brandy Dubois,
Aye.
Jeannie Borland.
Aye.
Okay, new business. Overpayments, underpayments for employees for fiscal year 2017.
Mr. President, I'm sure that when the board members saw this item, there was a little bit of panic. In the performance audit that was done in November of 2018, one of the findings was that in fiscal year 17, there were clerical errors that were caught that involved some overpayments and underpayments of employees. The processes and procedures that give us checks and balances for payroll that were put in place earlier this year have taken care of those problems. And that part has been cleared for us by the Auditor General's office. But they also recommended that we not have to go back and either correct overpayments or underpayments of employees in 2017, fiscal year 2017. But that needs to be formally recognized in board minutes. So hence the motion that I suggested to you, that then we can report to the Auditor General's office that the board has knowingly and willingly acknowledged that they're not going to go back and justify those things. It would take many hours of work to go back through all of those payrolls.
So this is just for us to say that we're not doing it.
Yes,
We're
that's
not,
all it
we've
is.
acknowledged it, we're not going back to find out what those
Right.
are.
And it also says to us that the Auditor General does not expect you to go back and correct it.
All right. Any questions on that? Okay,
I
I move
have a
that, I'm sorry, go
I have a
ahead.
question. I have a question. So the auditor found these underpayments and overpayments, all of them, and we'd have to go back and check them if we wanted to change it? I just, I'm not clear on that.
Sure. Yeah, I asked about that as well. It would mean going back through every payroll in fiscal year 17 and fiscal year 18 and checking absolutely every time sheet against what was actually paid out to people. So 26 payrolls a year times however many employees. It would be, the Auditor General says, it would be a prohibitive, time-consuming task to go back through 52 payrolls, one employee at a time. They
Okay,
found them as random. You know, they pull random things when they do their checks. You know, when they're doing their audit, they don't pull everything. So they just, they all have computers that say, go pull X, Y, and Z. And so it happened that when they pulled however many of the records they pulled for that year, that they found errors. And they were clerical errors.
Okay, that was my question, that they were random, like they don't know every single,
No, they don't.
okay. Okay, and then how are we to, like, go about making sure that these clerical errors are corrected, so that we're not underpaying or overpaying?
That's an excellent question. We have in fact instituted changes in number one, which employee puts in the information about which of our office employees. So in this case, the HR specialist puts in the information about a new employee, puts in their salary and their hourly rate. The payroll clerk is, a payroll specialist then is the one who produces the vouchers and the checks for payroll. And then we have a third step where our business clerk checks the timesheets and those things against the checks and vouchers. So we really have two checks and balances in place where we had none in the past.
Okay, thank you, I just wanted to know about that.
Any other questions?
I move the bullet city element. Sorry, Mr. President, Doug, I move the Bullard City Elementary School District not bill employees for overpayment nor pay underpayments to employees for fiscal year 17 and continue corrected practices into the future.
I'll second that.
Corey Burgess,
Aye.
Doug Lutz,
Aye.
Randy Dubois,
Aye.
Jeannie Borland.
Aye.
Item 5.2, resignation of board member. We just have to identify that we had a board member resign, correct?
You identify, and then I sent to you all in the memo the steps that the county superintendent said that you could follow. So as a board, you can decide to publish that you have an opening, accept applications, and recommend to the county superintendent an individual to fill that position. You could also wait and see how many folks there are who pull paperwork to run in the next election and do some things relative to that. There are a number of things you can do. Right now, you're just acknowledging that you have a vacancy and can indicate what you would like to do relative to filling that vacancy.
I personally like the idea of waiting until July as recommended, seeing who pulls papers. We can always nominate somebody at that point if we don't get enough people, and they can start their term early.
I agree with Corey.
This is Doug. I agree also.
So we
Sounds
just,
good to me too.
so at this time, we just have to recognize that Diane Beardsley resigned her position with our board, and at this time, we're waiting we're actually holding off to see what path we're gonna take.
Okay, so you're not taking any action,
No action.
and that's okay.
Item 6.1, future topics. Are there any future topics members would like to see on the next agenda?
I think I asked for future topics last time, that those are probably still in place, and just the continuing with the school closures and all those kinds of things that we'll need to address when they come up.
Brandy, were you satisfied with the written report I sent you relative to substitute teachers?
I'll have to go back and look at it. I don't recall seeing
Okay.
that one.
You can let us know.
Okay, thank you.
Any other future topics? If something does come up, we know we are in a very liquid time right now, very fluid time. Things are going to change all the time. Just please send myself and Dr. Stewart an email and let us know, and we'll get those on the agenda. Item 6.2, upcoming board events. We don't have any.
Other than the special meeting you've scheduled,
Oh,
that's it?
yes, the 24th, correct?
Yes.
Yes, we have the 24th at 5:30 p.m. Then we have date, time, location for our future meetings. Recommendation down here is April 16th at 5 p.m. For a workshop, and our meeting at 6.
Do you want 5 or 5:30?
Well, I think with all the things that are coming down the pipe,
Maybe 5.
to discuss what that is would be best at the workshop. You agree, members?
Yes,
Right? Does the 16th work for everybody?
yes.
Ms. Borland?
Yes, it works for me.
Mr. Lutz?
I'm not sure at this point. Hopefully it does, but
All right, just let us know if
I
something
can't
does come up.
sure.
Right. Item 7.1.
You can decide whether to have an executive session or not. She's not here and she does not represent it.
So we can just.
You can-
For our 7.1 through 7.4, at this time I want to just move on with our meeting and move on to 8.1, unless anyone has any objections to that. No? All right.
No.
Go ahead. Mr. Watt, did you have a question?
Oh, I said no objections.
Okay. Item 8.1. This is the possible action for non-renewal of an employee contract for Director of Special Services, Elisa Burrows. Dr. Stewart?
Thank you, Mr. President. Due to a planned change in the structure of our special services program and some inconsistencies in effectiveness of the current program. I'm recommending that we not renew Ms. Burrow's contract as a special services director.
Anyone have any questions on that?
I thought we were going to have an executive session. I was going to ask questions at that point. I feel I don't have enough information to properly vote for that at this time.
We can move to executive session. So at this time, would you like to make a motion?
Yes, because I don't have enough information.
Yes, no problem.
To vote. So I move we go to executive session.
I'll second that.
Corey Burgess,
Aye.
Randy Dubois,
Aye.
Doug Lutz,
Aye.
Jeannie Borland.
Aye.
All right, we are in executive session.
Okay, guys, this is when you guys go ahead and go and use the